Hello and welcome again to Catholic Concern for Animals YouTube conversations. This one we are pleased to welcome to our little Zoom parlor Martin Smrek, who has been our partner in uh, campaigns against live carp sales in Eastern Europe. And we're absolutely delighted to have recently teamed up with Chris, going over to Bratislava to help with the launch of the campaign over there. And we were going to talk to Martin about that and about the issues that are faced by animal advocacy groups in Eastern Europe. So, Martin, why don't we start by you introducing yourself and your organisation and telling us about the campaign that was recently launched.
So, hi, and first of all, thank you for having me here. If I should start with introducing myself, my name is Martin, as you already mentioned, and I'm the executive director of Humanny Pokrok, which is an animal advocacy group from Slovakia, which was established in 2009 and grew to a bigger and wider focused animal advocacy group, focusing mostly on the animals that are the most numerous, exposed to the most horrible cruelties, and usually the mostly neglected ones. That has brought us to focus mostly on chickens, laying hens, farm animals farmed for fur, and most recently uh, dealing with fish, especially with carp, which is the fish that is usually eaten during the Christmas traditions in Slovakia, Poland, and Czech Republic. Right now, we have, I think, 13 employees, and we have a wide range of campaigns and some nice successes, like banning the fur farming in Slovakia in 2019 and getting most of the retailers committed to end using caged eggs in their stores. And what we are working right now on is banning one of the most cruel practices in Slovakia, which is essentially selling live carps during Christmas time. What happens in this country, or not only in this country, but also in Czechia and Poland, and almost exclusively in these three countries, is that during Christmas time, the carps are being sold alive, and usually in front of supermarkets, like in the middle of the parking lot, you will find a huge vats of water filled to the brim with live carps. These carps are taken out and sold alive to people, and people bring them home in a plastic bag without the water. They travel in buses with these live carps in plastic bags. They bring them home. They fill their bathtubs with water and put the live carp into the water. The water is chlorinated, so it burns their eyes and their gills. And also it's not oxygenated, so the carp suffocates slowly, and the only option is to give them more chlorinated water and burn their eyes again, and so on and so on. And in the end, people will slaughter the animal themselves. Essentially, no one is actually qualified to do that, so this is usually done in a very cruel way. The manipulation with the carp is very painful and usually very clumsy because people have no idea how to handle live fish, and in the end they will beat the fish to death with some blunt object, or in the worst case they will cut their heads while the fish is still alive and fully conscious. And this is considered to be the Christmas tradition in Slovakia throughout the last couple of decades, even though this is not necessarily a Christian tradition, or not at all a Christian tradition, but something that was developed by the communist parties in this region in order to support local fisheries. And this tradition usually impacts around 1 million carps each year, just in Slovakia. The markets in Poland and in Czech Republic are rather bigger, but we don't have exact numbers for that, just for Slovakia. And what we decided to do last year was that we need to do something that will actually help fish in our region. and also prepare for broader fish welfare work in Slovakia, because as you probably know, most certainly know, that fish are the most numerous species that are harmed by humans, and the numbers of fishes that are killed every year dwarf the numbers of the land mammals and all the land animals altogether. We're talking about 70 or 80 billion land animals killed by people for food every single year, but we're talking about 1 to 3 trillion fishes every single year. So in order to be able to work with this huge amount of suffering of all these fishes, we decided to start with the most tangible topic in Slovakia, which is live carp sales. And 1 million of carps being slaughtered every single year in this horrible way might seem like a very small number compared to that 1 to 3 trillion, but it is the first step towards Slovakia being able to fight for fish welfare in general. So there's the short story of our work and our campaign right now.
Well, a very comprehensive one. Like lots of things in there, Marty. I mean, before I get on to kind of unpacking some of that, your campaign has had some success in the last couple of years, hasn't it?
Oh yes, we have a couple of successes. Most recent ones are just a couple of days and weeks old. So the campaign started last year, by the end of 2021, with already, we launched a petition collecting signatures to end the live carp sales, which is the main goal of the campaign. And already last year, we were able to get 3 commitments from retailers to end this practice. Because as I mentioned, most of this practice in Slovakia has moved in front of supermarkets. So usually on their own parking lots, they provide their own space to these fish vendors and these spots where the fish are slaughtered or sold alive. So what we started to do was reaching out to companies and asking them to commit to not sell live fish themselves and not to allow third parties to do that on their premises. And we managed to get on board Kaufland, which was one of the two main companies engaged in live carp sales, and after that, two smaller retailers. And the follow-up this year brought up a commitment from Tesco, which was the second major player in the live carp sales, Billa and Lidl. So right now we have 6 out of 7 of the biggest retailers in the Slovakia committed to end this practice. Some immediately, some from the next year, but by 2023 there will be only one big retailer that doesn't have the commitment yet, and one bigger cash and carry company, which is a bit more complicated. But other than that, the majority of the market should bring us to the point where live carp sales should not be a thing at the most exposed locations during Christmas time. It doesn't mean that it is going to be completely gone. We are now negotiating with municipalities and in order to gain similar commitments from them, the same way as it happened in Poland, where city of Wrocław made a commitment that the city will not allow live carp sales of any kind on their public premises. And this is something we want to see in Slovakia too. And after that, we would like to see a total ban on live carp sales. So this thing will be just part of the history that will not repeat itself.
I must admit, I think we're being rather modest there. I think changing the behaviour of companies like Tesco and little major multinational companies seems pretty impressive to me. But that aside, I mean, one of the things that struck me about that, your description of the sales and people getting them home and the way these animals are treated, I think if that were in the UK, and I mean, we certainly have our fair share of animal cruelty over here. I'm not saying we don't, but I think if that were in the UK so visible, I think there'd be an outcry about that. How do people feel about these things in Slovakia? Is there just an acceptance that this is tradition and it's associated with a religious event, or are there people who regard this as problematic?
Well, there's a plenty of misconception about the practice, and the most common idea is that selling live carp and killing the carp by themselves at home is something that is strongly woven into the Christian traditions in our region. But that simply is not true. And deeper we dig into it, the more we realize that this is not really something that is happening anywhere else in the world as a part of Christmas tradition, and not even in the whole region. So this is more tied to having rather big fishing industry in the region. But people are rather open and responsive to these topics. What we were not expecting was that public will be really responsive to this, and we have a lot of mixed responses. But mostly the negative ones come from people who are directly engaged in the fish industry. So the fishers, the people who breed the fish and who sell them, who are actually afraid that they will lose their livelihood, which is understandable. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this would disrupt their businesses, because this is a case which is rather easy to solve, because the vast majority of the cruelty towards the carp happens after the fish is taken out of the water. But the 2 or 3 years before that, when the carp is being farmed in the pond, can be actually providing the carp with rather good living conditions. But all the problems start when you take the carp out of the water, and the shorter the time the carp has to spend out of the water and in the different stages of the live carp sales, the better it will be. So this is a rather easy and cheap opportunity to raise carp welfare significantly. But I think I got off the track because the question was leading somewhere else, right?
No, that's fine. I mean, you choose your own track, Martin, and we'll go with you. That's not a problem. Um, I I just wanted to kind of like because you said the cruelest part is the actual um sale of the live carp and post what happens to them in people's homes and transport and so on, which I can certainly understand. And uh, but there have been, I mean, our food fisheries in Slovakia and the rest of Eastern Europe, are they places which are well um, regulated and monitored? Because there's certainly been some issues with fisheries in this country with fish farms.
Well, the fish regulation in general is abysmal in the whole Europe, oh, not only in the whole Europe, in the whole world. We are still in a state where we don't count fishes as individuals, but as just the mass. So we weight them, and all the statistic reporting is about the weight of fishes, but not the number of individuals impacted. So
Yeah.
all the numbers we have are just estimates based on the average sales weight and similar measures. So this tells you a lot about the state of the regulation of fisheries. But from the data we can gather, the fish industry in Slovakia is not super huge. Essentially, just around 1/3 of all the carps sold during Christmas time in Slovakia is raised in Slovakia. The rest, almost 70%, are imports from Czechia and Hungary. So this is an issue that cannot be completely tackled by the local regulation. But from the data we've seen, the conditions on those farms are rather okay from what we reckoned, mostly because these are not artificial ponds, but the natural ones. So they're essentially part of the ecosystem, and they don't need to be that strongly regulated because the system can regulate itself partially. But there are some major concerns from European Office of European Food Security Agency. So we will dig into that more thoroughly. But these are some usually areas where there can be a set of very easy and cheap interventions that would be beneficial for both the carps and also the farmers. So this is something Fish Welfare Initiative is doing Fish Welfare Initiative is doing quite successfully in India, mostly focusing also on carp farms, where they have a lot of successful interventions and they want to scale up right now. So that is definitely one avenue we want to explore in the future. But right now we are focusing exclusively on the live carp sales, and the farms will be the second thing we can focus on.
As we mentioned before, that you launched your campaign earlier this month, and Chris was with you in Bratislava to be part of that, which we were absolutely delighted about. How did that work from your perspective? What was the point of getting us involved, and what kind of impact did that have?
Well, the general idea was that we need to explain to the public that the Christian traditions, as we know them, are not necessarily tied to slaughtering carps in your bathrooms or in your kitchens yourselves. That this is something artificial and this is something that we don't need to have while we can still celebrate the Christmas time the way we are used to. That there is a simpler way to split the cruelty away from the traditions. And for this, we needed someone who actually has a strong Christian background and actually a knowledge of all the teachings of the Christian faith, which I am definitely not. So this is something where we need someone to help. And we also wanted to have a strong and defensible positions toward the church, the Christian church in Slovakia, and the conservative media in the country. So the idea was to have a press conference when someone who has the competence and has the knowledge about the Christian traditions will explain this to the public and to the media, and inviting mostly the conservative media to the press conference, which went well. We got the biggest conservative press coming to the press conference and actually making a story out of that, which pretty clearly explained that killing carp at Christmas at home is not something that comes up from Christian tradition, and that is unnecessary cruelty towards animals, which is everything that we needed from this to actually have it printed, and the conservative media to understand that that slaughtering carps at home, buying them in a plastic bag in front of the supermarket, has nothing to do with celebrating Christmas. And it also opened the discussion that the traditional Christmas foods that were being eaten in our region were far from what we are used to eat during the last couple of decades. So this could be also beneficial for the future. But the main idea was to be able to actually tackle the issue of untangling traditions from the cruelty towards animals.
What about the church in Slovakia? What kind of the church is in Slovakia, and what kind of attitude have they had, and has there been any change in that?
A change in what? I didn't catch that. Sorry.
The attitude of the churches. I mean, following your campaign, have you managed to change some of the attitudes within churches in Slovakia, or are they in support of this practice?
Well, there were a couple of articles and occasions during which the church made its position clear that the carps are a strong part of the tradition, which could be, but having the carp for dinner could be, but not slaughtering it at home. And they did not make this distinction in the beginning. But what is important, the church did not yet get involved in the campaign and making any public statements about that. And that was essentially what we are trying to prevent, that the church will take a strong position defending something that has essentially nothing to do with the Christian traditions and is immensely cruel to the animals. So right now, I think we were able to put this notion out. We published also some statements from Chris in our report about fish welfare and especially carp welfare in Slovakia. So we finally have this also in writing, and this could be a good basis for possible confrontation if the church decides to defend this practice for some reason. But I believe that the discussion has moved forward pretty strongly, and they would not have a reason to do that. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, Chris, is there anything you'd like to say at this stage?
Well, only to congratulate Martin and his colleagues on a superb piece of work, not only this year but previously, and not only obviously in this issue that we've been involved in, but their other campaigns that he outlined earlier in the conversation, and it is what he said in regards to the numbers of animals involved. A million fish is a lot of creatures, though it's not when you compare to trillions of fish that are affected by humans in the search for food every year. But it's still an awful lot of animals. And the thing here is the cruelty of the situation, and that Martin has described it. I mean, we often discuss farming of animals for human food in various contexts with various species. And we always, or not always, but very often say how the farming practices are very poor, especially in industrialized farming. And actually, as Martin has alluded to, some of the farming practices for carp are actually quite high welfare. It's what happens to the carp once they're taken out of the water, and then then can go on to the next stage of the process, i.e. for sale, transportation, and slaughter. That's the major problem, and it's been this tradition of keeping your carp, buying your carp live, taking it home, and killing it yourself is just incredibly cruel on so many levels. Each factor, the transportation, the keeping of the fish, and then the slaughter, each one is incredibly cruel, and Martin has explained the various reasons for that. It reminded me, in some ways, because you mentioned, Gerald, what happens in the UK. Many years ago, when I was a child, I remember they used to have fairs in the UK where they used to give goldfish out in plastic bags for you to take home. And obviously, it's not quite the same as a fully grown carp eating. The people aren't taking it home to eat, but there were prizes in fairs. If a child did something successfully, he got a goldfish in a bag with a little bit of water. And invariably, the kids were delighted. I mean, they won some. Look, I've won, and take it home. Invariably, the fish died. It was just suffered horrendously and died because probably the child forgot about it half an hour after taking it home, and what have you. But so and that obviously is something that has not really occurred much nowadays. I'm pleased to say, as far as I know. So it's this cruelty involved in this case of an animal that is being eaten at Christmas, in the Christmas period, and it has to do with a fasting period as well, and all the things regarding the Christian tradition of meat and fish and fasting. But the cruelty that is involved in the process is horrendous. So the progress that Martin and his colleagues have made in bringing this process not exclusively to an end, but very, very much reduced, and hopefully in years to come will be, if they get a ban, completely come to an end, is an incredible thing. And what I would say to end, because I don't want to take up too much time, is that, and I say this a lot, so people may have heard it before, is that animal advocacy is a long game. You have to put a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of hours in, and don't really see that many results sometimes. You campaign for sometimes decades before you see any progress, if at all. So the progress that Martin and his colleagues have made in Slovakia over a relatively short period of time is phenomenal. I mean, I've been involved in some campaigns for over 30 years, and they're still not come to fruition, and may never do so. So to achieve this in a very short period of time, in something that is embedded in the society as well, it's embedded in the society, and to have made this progress in a short period of time is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, indeed. I'm ashamed to say that I was one of those children with the goldfish one in the fair, which did survive for a while. But yeah, absolutely. Chris has alluded, Martin, to the other work that you and your organisation do. What are the kind of issues and campaigns you face within Slovakia? What other issues are you involved in?
Well, that will actually bring us to the fact that what we are doing is nothing special, and we are just repeating what did work in other countries and in other areas of interest. So what we were starting mostly with the plant-based outreach efforts in the first years of our organization, and from 2016 we decided that it is time that someone put a stop to fur farming and caged eggs in Slovakia, because as you mentioned, we've seen decades of campaigning in those topics and essentially no progress at all. So we decided, like, okay, it's time to stop this, and we started working on that. We've seen some successful campaigns happening in the region, mostly in Poland, with the cage-free efforts. So after that, we joined the Open Wing Alliance and got a lot of experience with running corporate pressure campaigns, which is the basis of the success we are having right now. And at the same time, we started our campaign to ban fur farming in Slovakia, which happened to be the fastest fur farming ban campaign in history. So I think we still hold this title. It was 7 months from the launch of the campaign until the ban of the practice in Slovakia. To be fair, we had just one mink farm with 5,000 mink and a couple of rabbit farms that most of them closed down, including the mink farm. So the industry was not very strong in the country and the opposition was neither. So that was a blitzkrieg at that point. And after that, we started collecting the cage-free commitments from retailers. So they would commit to stop using caged eggs from 2025 and so on. And this is, again, something that was proven to be a very successful tactic throughout not only Europe, but throughout the world. And what we've seen recently was that in Poland, Otwarte Klatki and I'm not sure if it was Albert-Schweitzer Stiftung or Compassion in World Farming and their Polish branch started to use the corporate outreach tactics to gain commitments regarding live carp sales in Poland. So we've seen a couple of successes there. They had like 7 commitments, and the new one was the commitment from the city of Wrocław, and we started applying the same techniques to Slovak market, and it started to bring up results. And we can see that this is spreading throughout the region. Recently, just last week, Lidl also announced their commitment in Czech Republic to not get engaged in live carp sales. So hopefully we will see this progress spread around the whole region, and hopefully in a couple of years the live carp sales might be only history, but we're not there yet. But to be fair, this is not something that we came up with. We're just doing what works and what we've seen working in other countries. So that brings us to what we are working on right now. That is finishing our fur farming efforts. You are probably aware of the Fur for Europe campaign that is aiming to ban fur farming and fur sales in the whole European Union. So we're collecting signatures to get rid of the fur industry in Europe finally. And we are running a campaign to ban cages for laying hens in Slovakia. So this is our main campaign, which will be struggling a bit because the government has just collapsed last week. So we need to figure out the way forward from this point. But this is our main priority, to get rid of cages for laying hens in Slovakia. And besides that, we are still engaged in our cage-free campaign on the corporate level. So we are collecting commitments from retailers, restaurants, hotels, and other facilities that use eggs to phase out their usage. And we also have plant-based programs. We have a big vegan food festival that used to attract around up to 10,000 visitors per event before the pandemic. Right now we are trying to revive that. And we have also plant-based corporate outreach efforts that are bringing in first results and has a lot of future ahead of them. So that's the short summary of what we are working on right now.
I think you should, sell yourself a bit more, Marty. I mean, that is not a small beer, in my opinion. You've had some tremendous successes there, and you should be applauded for that. And congratulations on those. I mean, with respect to the angle that you approach this from, which is rather different from our faith-based angle. A lot of the commentary in this country, I mean, you've had, our wonderful, stable, successful UK government has been arguing that those of us who are involved in these kind of debates are anti-growth, are anti-economic improvement. Is that kind of thing, did you face those kind of arguments in Slovakia?
Not yet, I think. I don't remember that we would get arguments like this. The most common argument is that there's not money for that. We cannot afford transition like that.
Yeah.
But nothing regarding growth, because what we are promoting is essentially growth. The technological one to move towards more effective and more sustainable ways of producing foods, and in the long run, into the vastly more effective ways to produce food, and changing food systems towards plant-based sustainable alternatives that will be relieved of suffering of the animals, and also all of the unnecessarily damaging practices to the environment. So
Yeah.
essentially what we are working on is a progress, both technological one and the economical one.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we would absolutely agree with that. I mean, one of the things which kind of uh, annoys and baffles me is that so many of our leaders in this country seem to have trouble getting their heads out of the 19th century and actually begin to think about the 21st century, where conditions are different, and we have popular support for the kind of policies that you've been successful with and the kind of policies that we've been pushing. I mean, uh, how is it? I mean, in terms of support in the community, how is that reflected in your organisation? Are you a membership organisation, or do you have other means of channeling support from the community?
Well, we're trying to build the community and the movement because, as I mentioned, there was a couple of organizations in Slovakia that were running animal welfare campaigns since early 1990s, but not with a lot of successes. And the movement is essentially non-existent. So what we are working on is building the movement, getting more people engaged. We are building a big is probably an overstatement, but we are building an expensive volunteer program with approximately 40 to 50 people engaged for at least 5 hours per week in our organization. So this is something we try to expand and build throughout the regions. But other than that, there are not that many community activities besides our vegan food festival and some small vegan food exchanges we are trying to establish all around the country. So this is something that takes a lot of our energy to build and establish and to work with. But of course, it's a good investment into the future of the organization, and we are able to recruit from these people, from the volunteer groups. But other than that, there is not a huge amount of support. Also, in the terms of donorship, people are not very used to support organizations financially in the Eastern Europe. So this is another thing we need to work on and to develop the donor culture in Slovakia. So there are many obstacles to work with, but we can see progress happening, and it is going in the right direction.
And the kind of people who, sorry, go on, Chris.
Yeah, I'd like to come in at that point, if I could, Gerald. Sorry to interrupt. Just to say that, and this is why one of the reasons why we're very delighted to have our partnership working with Martin, not only on the issue of carp, which we've talked about. That was a specific issue, and I think that was a particularly big issue that we had on our radar anyway for some time, because of the situation regarding Advent and Christmas. But it's important for us at CCA to work closely with our animal advocacy colleagues in different countries to actually say and raise the profile that the church is not, and it often is perceived to be, but is not actually supportive of animal cruelty or animal abuse. And there are often this misconception that somehow the church is fully behind cruelty, and that probably comes, I have to say, and I've said it again before, the perception of the church in Spain with bullfighting, and that sort of gives a view of the church which is not actually very fair, because the church in Spain is a law to itself, literally, even from the Vatican. So I'm delighted to hear that the church has made no intervention in trying to oppose in any way the work that Martin's doing, and it's our job to support colleagues in their countries, especially Catholic countries, of course, to say that, you know, the church, you know, it is not right to be cruel to animals. It is not right to do these things, and that's our role. And so I'm delighted to, you know, that there are other campaigns going on, and it's not unusual for many countries to have not a very high public understanding or support for animals. It's not unusual. I mean, actually, in fact, you could say in some cases it's the norm, and it's that part of our role to change that, to say that animals matter, and fish matter as well as land-based animals. And it's a complicated, long story to tell, but it's by working with colleagues like Martin, other colleagues in other Catholic countries in particular, not only in Europe but throughout the world. And as you know, Gerald, we're trying to look at some issues in Vietnam at the moment, the Catholic community there, to educate and say being cruel to animals is not acceptable as far as the church is concerned, and it's not.
Yeah, and I think it's also, you know, kind of worth reflecting, like the church, like society generally, although opposed to these issues, often perhaps doesn't express that opposition as well as it could. And community, I mean, I think when communities are faced with the issues, they very often you find more support than you think is there, but people don't want to be out there making that support visible, as it were. So what's the future hold in Slovakia, Martin? I mean, you're building these networks. You from what you're saying, you're also kind of like beginning to build networks into other countries like Poland and so on. Can you see how this may develop, or is it still early days yet?
Well, right now you got me in a situation only 3 days after the collapse of the government. So right now I'm focusing mostly on the short-term development and questions related to that. But in the long term, what we can see all around is the professionalization of the movement, organizations growing bigger, stronger, more effective, and more successful in the region. So I hope this trend will continue toward the next couple of years. And I would like to say that we will be victorious, but there are so many victories to be won so far that there's just too much work. And I think we will have a lot on our plates for the next couple of decades in order to solve everything. But from maybe midterm developments, where I see a lot of opportunity is the EU animal welfare legislation revision, which is happening. And this is something in which organizations like mine can have a strong impact. So this is definitely something we need to work in the next couple of years, and the networks of organizations throughout Europe will be instrumental in achieving that. So hopefully this is one of the big victories we can look forward to.
If I could interrupt again quickly, Gerald, just to say that if Martin wants any help dealing with collapses of governments, the UK animal advocacy world is full. They collapse 2 or 3 times a year at the moment over here. So we're getting used to trying to deal with new prime ministers, new governments, and so we've got a bit of current expertise on trying to deal with government collapse because we've had so many this year in the UK.
I'll keep that in mind, and if it doesn't work, I will reach out to Italians. They will definitely have something to say about
it. Maybe them as well. They've got a longer experience. We just had a very strange year over here. That's all.
Oh yeah, well, I shall. Yeah, we still got the same government, Chris. It's just different leaders. A few bit of musical chairs at the top. That's all. They like their parties, the Conservatives. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you go. Move away from that. Martin, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and an absolute pleasure being part of the campaign over there. And we're really, really delighted about the successes you've had. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
Well, first and mostly, thank you for having me again, and thank you for helping us with the campaign. And I believe you could still play a role in the future development of the live carp sales campaign, because the Catholic Church, especially the Conference of Bishops in Slovakia, has established themselves in the legislative process itself. So at the point where the law will be proposed one day to the parliament, they will have to officially comment on that. And they have a history of commenting on animal welfare issues, and usually from the wrong side of the history. So they were opposing making animals defined in legislation as beings capable of feeling and as a living thing, not just as an object. And they had also some issues with the ban on chaining dogs and other similar legislation proposals. So there will be opportunity to work with the Catholic Church in Slovakia in the future, but hopefully most of the work was done already when Chris visited our press conference in Bratislava. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me. And hopefully we will see the end of live carp sales in the Central Europe in the next couple of years.
Well, I'm sure we'd be very, very happy to work with you again on any of the issues that you've just outlined, or anything else that we can help you with. Chris, any final comments?
No, just to say once again, what a fantastic achievement in Slovakia. So thank you again to Martin for that achievement and for helping us do our little bit to support it. And hopefully there will be increased animal welfare for Slovakia and for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. So maybe that's we're recording this, aren't we, towards the end of the year, just before Christmas. So hopefully that's a positive message for Christmas and the New Year, that we have had some success, good success in Slovakia. As I said before, sometimes it's a lonely business, animal advocacy. You don't see successes, quickly and easily. But I think this has been a major achievement and a great way to end what's been a very difficult year in many respects for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, maybe we should just say, that we wish everyone out there a very happy Christmas. Let's push on me to get this edited and out. And also a peaceful and a less cruel new year, not just for human animals, but for all animals. So thank you for watching, and hope to see you again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.